So hello and welcome to another episode of TopTenz. I'm your interim host, Karl Smallwood. That's Karl with a K and Smallwood spelled exactly the way that it sounds. And today we're talking about 10 traits you thought made you human that have been found in other animals. And as with all the videos here on TopTenz, this one's based on a script submitted to us by a member of our writing team. That team member today being Ed Hatchett. You can go follow him on the social media links found below if you are so inclined. But let's get to it. We've done a list on mental illnesses in other animals, but that's just the tip of a very, very large iceberg, because it turns out we're nowhere near as unique as greedy religious nutjobs had your ancestors believe. We're not even the only creatures out there with religion. For example, did you know that animals out there have been displayed showcasing number 10? Knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing, especially from one generation to the next, put humans at the very tippy top of the food chain. It's basically the definition of culture. It's also found in numerous other species. For example, baboons teach each other the best foraging routes, fledgling birds learn how to fly by watching their parents, and rats learn safe foods by smelling each other's breath. There are countless other examples. Even fish have their schools, which, as it turns out, do better with experienced teachers. But it's not just sociable species. Solitary animals also show a basis for culture, at least in some sense. Young tortoises, for instance, learn to navigate around obstacles by watching others do it first. Needless to say, as species go extinct, so do their cultures. The last surviving North Atlantic right whales, all but wiped out by human whalers, now lack the knowledge of their old ancestral feeding grounds, further endangering the species as a whole. That's not to say culture is always a good thing, though. Sometimes established way of lives fall out of kilter with the environment, and a non-adaptive culture can lead a species to oblivion. Us humans are finding this out the hard way. Number 9, weird trends. In the age of TikTok, human trends are getting weirder all of the time, but so are the trends of our animal brethren. White-faced capuchin monkeys, for example, in Costa Rica, exhibit a number of, shall we say, unusual traditions, such as smelling each other's fingers. Hey, we invented that one first. And as a kind of game, biting off clumps of another monkey's fur and holding it in their mouth while the other tries to get it back. Now, these might sound silly for trends, but I've got 2 words to counter that. Tide Pods. So we can't exactly make fun of the capuchin monkeys on this one. We're getting back to the capuchin monkeys. These traditions tend to be fleeting, usually lasting roughly a decade, similar to our own decade-long fads and fashions. They also are pretty localized, so trends seen in one group of animals may not be seen in the next. Typically, these trends have no clear survival advantage. In fact, a new trend seen in one group of Costa Rican capuchins actually posed a threat to their survival as a whole, inserting a long, dirty finger right up to the first knuckle into the monkey's eye socket just above the eyeball. Those on the receiving end are very clearly uncomfortable, wincing and batting their eyelids, although futilely we might add, and they don't try to stop it. Actually, they encourage it, and the behaviour can last up to an hour. Again, this sounds like a stupid trend, but remember, Tide Pods. So in effect, they really, really are like us. Now, you might compare it to getting a tattoo or a piercing or eating Tide Pods on TikTok, but with nothing to show for the pain except for perhaps, as one theorist thinks, strengthening of social bonds and proving that you are not a pussy. Number 8, fashion. In addition to weird behavioural trends, we also find fashion in animals. I say wearing the most generic, boring outfit a man can wear, but hey, I'm 33, I've got an excuse, I'm done. My fashionista days are over. I wear some variation of this every single day. Now, bearded vultures, whose feathers are white, apply makeup in the form of iron-rich soil. Like human fashions, this signifies status in a way, with the older, more dominant birds wearing the most colour. There's even evidence for fashion in, of all things, fruit flies. One study found that virgin female fruit flies preferred green-dusted males after seeing other females mate with them. Then there are chimps who wear a single blade of grass in their ears. This started in 2010 when a chimpanzee in Zambia spontaneously stuck one in her ear and then left it there. Despite serving no obvious purpose, certainly no direct survival purpose, other chimps followed suit, then others, until 4 different groups were displaying the behaviour. Truly a fashion trendsetter right there. And I'm reminded of the stories from ornithologists about them being like, yeah, we maybe need to think about how we tag and release animals, because we keep tagging male birds and inadvertently making them more attractive to females because they now have this brightly coloured plastic adornment. And it's kind of upsetting, like, you know, the natural order of things, because males that wouldn't ordinarily be able to mate with females are now wildly more attractive because of this thing that we did to them. We're like directly influencing all of this bird sex and we don't know what to do about it. Anyway, number 7, drug use. Drug use is everywhere in the animal kingdom. Jaguars in the Amazon independently seek out DMT-containing yagé vine used by humans to make ayahuasca. Lemurs chew on narcotic millipedes and dolphins get high on pufferfish before, and we're not making this up, floating upside down in a daze, staring at their own reflections. Again, so like us. In fact, non-human animals like drugs so much they're willing to put up with the obvious and in often cases life-threatening downsides. Again, just like humans. Bighorn sheep, for example, addicted to lichen, grind their teeth right down to the gums, scraping their drug of choice from the rocks. Spider monkeys drunk on fermented fruit throw up and fall out of trees, sometimes injuring themselves, and one intoxicated moose in Sweden had the opposite problem, getting stuck in a tree instead. Animals have also been observed using drugs to cope with bad moods. In one famous study, rats kept in small cages with nothing to engage their naturally curious minds were far more likely to choose a sweetened morphine solution over water, and they drank themselves to death on the stuff. Even fruit flies are seen to turn to booze when they don't find a mate. Number 6, facial expressions. What could be more uniquely human than a smile or a frown, or any of the emotions that we're able to display? As it turns out, facial expressions are found in many other animals. Sheep, for example, not only show facial expressions, but they recognize them too. Studies have shown their ability to distinguish between calm, startled, and fearful expressions in photos of other sheep. They can even tell humans apart by looking at their faces, which might not sound that impressive, but I ask you folks at home, could you tell the difference between multiple different sheep? And if you could you tell if the sheep was frightened, startled, or curious? Probably not. Domesticated dogs, on the other hand, are also able to produce facial expressions, something wolves in the wild are not able to do. In fact, they do not have the same movement in their eyebrows, lips, and ears, which suggests an evolutionary or selective breeding pressure for interspecies human-to-dog communication. So do you know that thing dogs do when, like, you know, they go, and they feel really sad, or like they're trying to get like some bacon out of your sandwich? Yeah, wolves can't do that, and it's theorized that they just develop the ability to manipulate their facial features in a way that humans would recognize to better manipulate them. Yeah. Number 5, sense of humor. Did humans invent laughter? It seems unlikely because, according to some researchers, it evolved from the panting of play fighting between apes. The panting/laughing sound, as in humans, reassured others that the fight wasn't serious. Tickle any great ape today and you'll hear roughly the same noise, assuming the ape is in a good mood. For example, the late Coco the gorilla, who could use American Sign Language, once tied her trainer's shoelaces together and made the sign for chase. Some researchers think that sense of humor is something all mammals have, while others go further and think it's inherent to all animals, even the insects. After all, they say, we're continually finding out that they're more intelligent than we give them credit for, and as Darwin himself observed, animal intelligence varies mainly in degree, not in kind. So far, most research into non-human humor has focused on the great apes, but it'll be interesting to see where it leads. And I'm really excited for like just the time where we're able to communicate with animals, and I want to go to a comedy show and just have like a dog go up on stage. That'd be great. Number 4, complex language. Now, Coco the gorilla's humorous use of language also shows a grasp of complexity. For example, when asked to list things that are hard, she is said to have responded both rock and work. In other words, she understood that the words had 2 different meanings. Surprisingly though, the most complex language besides our own isn't to be found in the great apes or even mammals of the sea, but in, of all things, prairie dogs. So these highly social animals have different noises or words for different predators. Their warning call for coyotes, for example, is different to their warning call for hawks, humans, and so on. But that's not all. They also have describing words, for lack of a better term, for a predator's characteristics, allowing them to say how big they are and what colour they are, and so on and so forth. This means that they're able to form, in effect, entire sentences. And in captivity, prairie dogs under laboratory conditions have even been shown to describe things they've literally never seen before and would never encounter in the wild. So far, we've only really scratched the surface of prairie dog language. Now, it's one thing to match these sounds and behaviours with predators, but prairie dogs are continually chattering amongst themselves when their behaviour doesn't change significantly, e.g. running and hiding in response to these noises like ours generally doesn't when we're talking. It's practically impossible to know what they're saying, or in some cases, plotting. Number 3, storytelling. Surely storytelling is what sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. Stories are to humans as honey is to bees. Right? From history books to video games, science to religion, telling stories is our sole occupation. As it turns out though, many other animals do the same, including bees. The bees' famous waggle dance, in which they use physical movements to communicate the location of food, includes information about distance, direction, difficulty of route, and the value of the prize. However you look at it, they're sharing a narrative, and if insects can do it, why not other mammals? Now, it's been argued that dogs are constructing a narrative when they paw at their food bowl or scratch at the door to go out. They're referring to a problem and a solution to it, and in the case of wanting to go for a walk, to other locations as well. Again, it's not as complex as the communications that we have, but if you look at it in that way, it can certainly be argued that they are constructing a narrative in their mind. Now, there's no reason to think of non-human storytelling as being inferior to our own. It's doubtful the average Joe on the street could do a waggle dance, for instance. For example, according to some sources, dolphins may be able to use their sonar capabilities to tell stories in 3D by projecting sono-pictorial holograms for each other to look at. And 3D is something we've not figured out, because every time they've tried to introduce 3D to the cinemas, it falls flat on its ass. And dolphins can just do it. Number 2, spirituality. According to Jane Goodall, chimps appear to feel what we would describe as awe. In the course of her research, she saw chimps swaying rhythmically to a waterfall, then sitting down simply to observe it. This, of course, has some features of human spirituality, but it's impossible to say if it's the same thing. Other chimpanzee behaviours, for example, such as throwing gathered stones to leave markings on trees, almost suggest a religion, or they might just like throwing rocks at trees. I like throwing rocks at trees, it stands to reason chimps might enjoy it too. What we do know, however, is that other animals ceremonialise death. Elephants in particular perform parades when an elephant dies, with the corpse drawing not only its own herd, but members of other herds too. Interestingly, they stay close to their fallen, even when a corpse attracts predators. It calls to mind the kind of courage that humans often draw from their faith or their conviction. And it's worth noting in regards to elephants that appropriately named elephant graveyards will be visited for months, if not years, after the fact, when the herd passes through, almost as if they're paying respect to the fallen elephant. Moving on to dolphins, they're known to do it too. For example, in the year 2000, the corpse of a female found on a seabed near Japan was accompanied at all times by 2 very aggressive males. Her guardians surfaced only for air, keeping up their vigil for 2 straight days, and when divers tried to remove the corpse, the males fought them off on 2 separate occasions. By the 3rd day, the corpse had disappeared. In another case, dolphins were observed guarding the corpse of an infant and chasing off seabirds even as it rotted. Moving on once again to chimps, they show the same kind of reverence for the dead. When a baby dies, its mother will continue to care for it, carrying and grooming it for days, weeks, even months afterwards, only stopping once the corpse has decayed beyond all recognition. And because that's an awful image, let's just move on quickly to other apes, including gorillas, baboons, macaques, and lemurs, who also seem to have death rituals. So do the birds. Crows, jays, and others often gather around their fallen, apparently to mourn. Number 1, cooking. Fire helped humans dominate the earth, as well as allowing us to live in freezing environments. It opened up our food options and sped up digestion. No other animal cooks food with fire, at least as far as we know, but some are definitely capable of doing so. For example, one bonobo learned how to start a fire using fuel and matches provided by humans, which he then used to cook burgers and marshmallows, before teaching his skill to his son. Admittedly, the bonobo was repeatedly shown the film A Quest for Fire to put the idea in his mind, but he still picked up on the skill for himself, demonstrating a formidable intelligence. And in any case, many humans today can't start a fire even in the most favourable conditions. The fact that a monkey could literally do it is like, just a cause of shame for all humans unable to start fires like Bear Grylls could. Of course, there's a lot more to cooking than fire, but humans aren't alone in food preparation, whether it's for taste or digestion. Some Japanese macaques, for example, wash sweet potatoes before they eat them and seem to prefer using salt water purely for flavour. Pigs will often wash their food too, and they've been seen washing dirty apple chunks in a stream. And keep in mind, these are pigs, they'll eat almost anything. Then you have shrikes, meanwhile, who impale their food on thorns or barbed wire and allow them to degrade before eating, ostensibly to aid in digestion. Capuchin monkeys, once again, leave palm nuts out in the sun to make them easier to crack. Interestingly, big-headed ants have a more advanced form of cooking still, putting food on their larvae's bellies for them to spit enzymes onto, thereby making it easier to digest. Now, this has been a fascinating and informative script for me to read through today, and I hope you folks at home agree. And if you do, you can go thank the author Ed Hatchett on their socials link below. I'm also down there if you don't believe my name is Karl Smallwood. You can like the video, comment with feedback, suggestions, or like other cool animal facts you may know, and subscribe for more content like this. And I should probably acknowledge the stuffed anteater on my desk here. This is Snoot. They make various appearances in ad spots for geographics and biographics. This is my pet anteater. It is stuffed. I love him. I found him in the garbage. If you would like to know more about that story, you can tune into my Twitch streams on Friday night, where I like to tell the story of how Snoot came into being. Otherwise, you just have to live with the knowledge that you will never know how I found this thing in the garbage. Cheers, everybody.